Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Today I'm reviewing the Erica Synths Graphic VCO. Now Erica Synths are not particularly into using descriptive terms in the names for their modules. They like to, to say what they see. So you have the black VCO, there it is, and you have the graphic VCO because it's got a little screen on it. But that actually tells you very little about what this oscillator is. So let me unpack it for you. It's a wavetable adventure playground oscillator. That's what they should call it, the WAP. And that I think gives you a little bit more of a flavour as to what this fella is about. The Graphic VCO is all about wavetables. Tables and tables of waves, and waves in tables, and tables with waves in it, and then wavetables of wavetables. You've kind of got to see it as a spreadsheet in Excel full of little waves which are then tabled or something. No, what it is, right? Back in the 19-something or other, a guy called Wolfgang Palm invented the PPG, which is this awesome big fat synthesizer that used individual little waveforms in a table to generate the synthesis. And that gave birth to the idea of wavetables. The essence of it is that you take a bunch of waveforms, squiggly lines, you know waveforms, you've got a sine wave, you've got your sawtooth wave, you've got your square wave, those sorts of things, and other hand gestures too. But if you take more complex waveforms, they can create a more interesting sound. Now, just taking a single complex waveform is a very unnatural sound. It's a very boring sound. But what's interesting about putting these waves into a table is that you can move between them. And that generates a bit of movement, a bit of interest, something that's more natural. Because sound, as it is, doesn't tend to stay the same. There's only sort of electronic sounds that stay the same. Normal sounds in real life change and evolve and move. The harmonic content changes. You start with something and you go somewhere else. And wavetable synthesis attempts to emulate that. And that's why it's always been very good at generating very natural sounds. Or at least it approximates a natural sound, because it isn't a natural sound, because you don't naturally have a single waveform which is repeating constantly in order to create that sound. Sounds in reality are far more complex than that. However, what wavetable brings to the table is harmonically rich and interesting sounds, and ones which are at their best when they're in motion. Let me give you a really quick example by just dashing through some of the wavetables in the Graphic VCO while playing my sort of jaunty little sequence that I've got going. So just very simply, I can dial through different forms of sound. And load them up. So this is an example of some of the sounds in there. What the heck is going on? Well, I'm loading up a different wavetable, and then I've got a sequence playing the notes, and then I've got another channel on my variegate here sending out CV in order to change the wave that's being used within that wavetable. So with every note you're getting a slightly different sound, and that's kind of where this movement and this change and this interest comes in wavetable synthesis. Let me make that even more basic. There you are. So that is a single wave from the wavetable called spectral, and what I can do is move to the other waves in that table by using the lovely morph knob over here. Isn't that lovely? Now they tend to be harmonically related within a wavetable. Any reason for that? I don't think so. I just think it plays into our desire to organise things, and it keeps things together and makes some kind of sense. I mean, you can have whatever waves you like in a wavetable, but in order to get a nice smooth transition from one wave to another, having them similar to each other helps with that. And that's the fabulous thing about wavetable, because this is digital. This isn't an analog oscillator. This is a digital oscillator that uses essentially samples of single waveforms. Then the digital nature of that can interpolate a route from one wave to another and make that a smooth transition. And that's what gives us that lovely change. I'll load up a different one, the acid one for instance. You can hear those harmonics sweep through. So that would be quite interesting if I put the rhythm back into there. Let's try another one. Some FM bells. Something more complex. Of course, you could stick a low frequency oscillator into that in order to move it about. Or do something a bit more radical with a square wave. Or putting something a bit more random. So that right there is what Wavetable is all about. A whole bunch of different waves, morphing from one wave to another within the wavetable that creates this kind of harmonically rich and interesting morphing from one sound to another. Fabulous for sort of 80s chiptune, fabulous for all sorts of noises and squirts and spigots, and very, very different to the regular sine wave, saw wave, pulse waves that you get out of an analog oscillator. And that's why we like it. When I started off in this journey into Eurorack, after I got myself an oscillator, I sort of went searching for what do I get next. And the best piece of advice I received was to get something digital, get something which gives a different flavor. Because I had the Moog Mother 32 and I had the STO as an oscillator. And so in order to get something digital, I got my hands on the black Wavetable VCO over here, which is Erica Synths' original wavetable oscillator. And that was a lot of fun. You've got a bunch of different waves that you get to through a button. There we go. And you can then morph between the waves on this knob here, and it works very, very simply and very well. And you can sweep through things and choose different wavetables and even load up other wavetables by replacing the chip in the back. And the Graphic VCO does all that too. But the beauty of the Graphic VCO is that it takes that idea and just opens it up for abuse, I was going to say. I suppose it does, but it opens it up for editing and change and individualism and user-definedness for not just the morphing in a wavetable, but the complete changing from table to table, between tables, let alone waves within tables, but tables within tables. It gives you multiple ways of accessing those tables, different ways of approaching it, and even lets you design your own. Plus, it has a bunch of effects inside too for further mangling and extraordinary extrapolations. So when I said Wavetable Adventure Playground, what I probably meant was a Wavetable Disneyland. Let's get stuck into it. Now, the Graphic VCO is a menu and screen-driven oscillator. Now, that may be an instant turn-off for you. It sort of was for me to a degree, because it's not something that I look for or desire necessarily in my Eurorack, but I appreciate the fact that it does come along from time to time, and they can be extraordinarily useful. The interface with this is not bad at all. It's not desperately deep, so you're not having to fiddle around too much, but I do tend to get my knobs in a muddle and forget which one is doing what, but it's not difficult to work that out. So the annoyance factor of screen and encoders is there, but it's low, so it's not too bad. We can get over it, and the reward for getting over it is an awful lot of power. So this is your main menu screen. You have 8 different items. You've got the currently selected form of making noises. You've got the thing which allows you to select that making noise mode. You've got effects. You've got a sub-oscillator section, which is very, very interesting. You've got a scope, which shows you a lovely picture of what's going on, which is lovely. We like that. There's snapshots so that you can take pictures or save whatever it is that's going on as a snapshot so you can come back to it later. Very, very useful, because when you turn it off, you lose everything. It all just goes away. Because you're not, on an analog oscillator, for instance, you set all these things and they stay set because they're physically controlling something in the background that is relative to what it says. Whereas with digital jiggery-pokery, you're sort of telling a DSP or a computer what to do. And the knobs actually mean nothing. They're just kind of a visual representation to you as you move something about. But as soon as you take the power away, all those settings are effectively destroyed. And so I would recommend that when you get the Graphic VCO that you should learn how to use snapshots quite early on, because otherwise you're always coming back to each time you turn it on. At least that was my experience. A lot of and then having to start again. Then you have some sort of utilities and setup business. We're not going to worry about that too much. So to begin at the beginning with the Graphic VCO, you need to choose the mode you're going to use. There are a couple of different modes. There is an A-B mode where you choose 2 different waves and play in between them. You have a wavetable mode, which is what we've been using up to now, where you just load a wavetable and then mess about with that. You have a matrix mode, which is fabulous, which allows you to have this, you sort of play join the dots on the screen and move a thing and move a box around. It's fabulous. I'll show it to you in a minute. And then you've got live mode, which does bugger all because I haven't invented it yet. But apparently this feature will be available in an upcoming update. How exciting. So there's more to come, whatever that's going to be. Now, as you can see, you use these two encoders here and this button to navigate around the place. The left-hand one seems to do most of the moving about. The right-hand one tends to move parameters. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the other way around. You just have to work it out as you go. So we're going to select AB by pushing down on it. And the display now shows you that I can load a wave in A and I can load a wave in B. Now this particular mode gives you access to every single wave, not just the wave tables, but the waves within the tables. So if I push down to load, I can select from 1 all the way down to 32 wavetables, and there's a user wavetable as well. And I can choose any of these and then choose a wave within it. So let's start with just some basic waves. Go on basic, and then I've got a sine, I've got a rampy thing, a triangle, a square, and pulses, and bits and pieces. So I could choose something simple, like the sine wave for this one. And then for B, I could load something slightly more complex, like a square wave. So you can hear them both going in there. That's because I've still got this jammed into the morph. If I take that out for a second, I should now be able to morph from that sine wave to that square wave. Have you ever experienced anything quite so exciting in all your life? If I put it in the middle, I could choose something slightly different. So there's all sorts of synthesis going on here, in that at a sort of a basic level, I'm doing a little bit of wave mixing. I'm kind of adding these two together because I'm not moving them about at the moment. I'm just mixing between two different waveforms. So you can do some regular stuff like I was doing on the black VCO when you mix the part of the sine, the saw wave and the pulse waves together in order to create a more complex output. You can do that very simply with the Graphic VCO using these basic waveforms. And I like that a great deal because sometimes wavetable for me is somehow too much, too rich, too glassy and metallic. Something very digital is often going on, when actually at some grassroots level there's some seriously warm and thick sounds available if you dig around in the more simpler waveforms. So let's throw a little bit of modulation into the morphing. But of course, then screw it, let's make it more complex. Now, one interesting thing to note at this point is what happens to the morph knob when you plug something in. Without anything plugged in, the morph knob morphs or sweeps from one wave to the other. It's like a mix. It's like a mix between the two. So all the way over to the sawtooth, so all the way over to the other one. But when you stick a patch cable into the morph CV, this then becomes an attenuator. So the further I push it up, the wider the modulation. Obviously you can sit here all day just trying out different wave combinations to see how they feel. One thing to look at this point is the display. If we come out of all of this and go to the scope, you can then see a proper representation of the waveform, and that could be very interesting to watch as you morph from one wave to the other. One thing that I would really like to see in the Graphic VCO is a quicker route to the scope, because you find yourself always going back to the scope. Whatever you're doing, really, you just want to have a look at those waveforms. And to get there, if you're in some other menu somewhere, you always have to come back out, then scroll to that, and then hit the button. And there you are. And that's all right, but it couldn't it, just kind of revert to that after 5 seconds, or there being a switch where you could turn it on so it just reverts to it? Or maybe you hit 2 things at the same time and you get straight to it. Is that a possibility? Because otherwise it's just on the edge of being a faff. Also, within A/B mode, you have the opportunity to edit the waveforms. Now that's rather exciting and sort of interesting and weird and tricky and cool, sort of all at the same time, but we'll come to that in a little while. I'm going to have a look at the other modes first, and we'll come back to wave editing itself in a bit. So the next mode we're going to look at is the matrix mode. Hit that button there, and you now have this matrix of so many by so many, and that represents the entirety of the wavetable memory within the system. And what you can do is you can create a box in which waves will be selected, either in the X direction or in the Y direction, and you can move that box around. And the little dot that's in the middle there, that is what's selecting the individual waves. Now I think I'm right in saying that each of the rows is its own wavetable. So as you move from left to right or right to left on the X-axis, you're essentially morphing through one of the wavetables. Whereas if you're going up and down in the Y-axis, you're morphing from wavetable to wavetable. I think that's right, but I'm sure brainier people than me will be able to point out what that is. And if you know the answer to that question, do mention it in the comments and set me straight. But whatever it is, the matrix is a bunch of waves on a grid, and you can select them with knobs and stuff. So that's nice. Let me turn that up and show you what I mean. Now I confess that I don't always fully understand what the X and Y parameters are doing. To create that box and move it around, I seem to be often moving this knob and nothing is happening and nothing is changing to the box, and if I press it down, then something else is happening. There's an offset or something. Oh, I don't know. But the joy of this is that it doesn't really matter, because I'm not interested in selecting a specific wave necessarily. I can do that in A and B, whereas within the matrix I just want to create a space, a plane within which I can play with the different waves. So now I've created my box, I've created the biggest box I can find. Now if I use this effects knob here, it now doubles up as moving the waves in the X axis, and the morph knob moves the waves in the Y axis. Now in changing the size of that box, I can restrict the wavetables that I'm accessing, because once I start putting modulation in here, I can then move that point around in all sorts of places, and I might want to put that to a certain amount of wavetables. So let me stick my LFO back in to get one of them moving, one axis moving, and I'll take another LFO to get the other axis moving. So I've now got it wanging from side to side and going up and down. And if I turn the effects knob and the morph knob all the way up, it now moves in the greatest range that it can, depending on what's been fed into it, of course. Now it's now drawing a kind of a circular path because both dimensions are being modulated at once, and it's morphing itself between all those different waves. If I take out the rhythm and the notes, you can hear that more effectively. So using a combination of modulations, you can generate some really interesting sound fields. I mean, I've got a bit of a randomization sample and hold type thing going into one axis and just a sine wave going into the other. And so it's nicely morphing, and then it leaps to another wavetable and morphs through that. It's endless fun. And if I drag this box around a little bit differently, I can give it a smaller area to play in. It's amazing. It's just amazing to listen to, and it's amazing to watch. You know, you can just watch that scope going, oh, that's beautiful, look at those waves. Now at this point I think it would be good to talk about the sub, because the sub within the Graphic VCO is unlike any other sub I've come across. Not that I've come across lots, but In my experience so far of Eurorack, a sub tends to be either an octave or 2 octaves below a big fat square wave and gives it that beefiness in the sound. The sub in the Graphic VCO can do that, sure, but it's actually a lot more manipulable than that. Let's plug that into what is going on here. Now the first thing you'll notice, probably, is that it's not just a pulse wave, it's actually a wavetable. It's the same wavetable as the main oscillator, just an octave lower. Let's just stop the craziness for a second. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so with this sub then, you've got a bigger, broader, fatter, more lovely sound going on. This is just the beginning. Let's go to the sub menu within our menu system. Now you have some options in here. The first one being offset. Wonder what that is. Well, that changes the note of the sub. So at the moment it's 12 semitones down, so it's an octave down. And I can move that once I've remembered what the knob is. I can move it down to 2 octaves to start with, but obviously what's more interesting about this, if I bring it back up, is that I could be at a 7th, or a 5th, or a 3rd. So suddenly now I've got an interval going on. I've not just got an octave, I've not just got the one note, I've got 2 notes playing together. That's interesting. I can also set them at the same, and then go down to this little bit here, which is detuning. And I can add a little bit of detuning. With the mix option, that allows you to set between how much is just the sub coming out of that output and how much is a mix between the sub and the original oscillator. And then finally at the bottom, you don't have to have it as a copy of the wavetable. You can change that to be a nice sine wave. Triangle, saw, ramp, square. Or you can select your own, so you can choose any way from within the wavetable to be the sub. That's extraordinarily powerful. And of course, as I've selected an individual wave, that one is no longer morphing about. So this allows you to create kind of a very different thing going on with the sub. now have two very different sorts of sounds coming out of the same oscillator, the same monophonic oscillator, sort of. And so hopefully what you can see with my demonstration here is that there's a huge range of sounds, a massive sonic palette available in the Graphic VCO from the main oscillator, and then sort of supplementing that with the sub oscillator, which can be anything you want. It can be anything. The next thing to talk about is the effects that are inside. There's a bunch of them, not necessarily what you'd expect there to be, but a lot of really interesting things that you can do to waves. As I say, it's a Wavetable Adventure playground. You can do a whole load of stuff. We've been playing on the swings and the roundabouts a bit. Now we need to look at the monkey bars and the seesaw thing. And one interesting thing of note is that the effects only take place over the main oscillator. They do not affect the sub oscillator whatsoever. So the sub can carry on doing its thing while you mangle the main oscillator. So let's take the sub out of the equation for the moment and just focus on the main bit. Right, for the effects, I'm just going to go back to some basic waveforms because they tend to allow you to demonstrate them a little bit easier. At least that's what I found. Because otherwise, there's just a whole load of stuff going on. I'm never quite sure whether it's the wavetable that I'm morphing, or maybe it's the effect on the wavetable that I'm morphing. I don't know, it's all very mighty morphing, whatever it is. So let's go to effects on our menu. And we have a handful. We have from bypass, first of all, which is always useful. I like that one. You've got FM. You have ring modulation. You've got phase distortion. You've got folding, warping, no, wrapping, beg your pardon, crushing, driving, and that's it. So let's start with frequency modulation and see if I can bumble my way through that. You have on the left encoder here depth that you can select. And then on the right hand side, on this encoder, you can change what it is that's causing the effect. So you can choose between pot, for instance. So when you have pot selected, then the effects knob here becomes important. You can switch that to input. So you take something from something else, plug that into the effects input. And there is your frequency modulation. And on the display here, it shows you what's coming into the input, which is very, very useful. You can also scale that, so you can see what's going on. But of course, this being FM, you don't just have to take a little bit of modulation to give it a wobble. You could take another oscillator and jam that in there. And do all sorts of crazy stuff like that. The other alternative is that you have an internal oscillator. Yeah, another internal oscillator. A modulation oscillator. A low frequency oscillator, if you will. And you can, rather than having to have something coming in from the outside, you can apply that directly internally. So it can be different sorts of waveforms, triangle, ramps, saws, squares, sample and hold as well, which is rather nice. You can decide whether that's syncable or not syncable, and then change the ratio. loads of fun to be had. Okay, let's move on from FMs. I don't really know what I'm talking about. Let's go to the next option, which is ring modulation. Ring modulation does a very similar thing. Next up is phase distortion. Phase distortion is a bit like pulse width modulation, at least that's the sort of the sound that you get, and it's about shifting the phase of those waveforms. So if we just leave it on this knob here, you can hear that very familiar pulse width modulation type sound. If we come back out to the scope, you can see that actually happening. So if I go back to my effects bit here, I can change that to input and then modulate it. Or I can again, of course, use the internal oscillator. Next up is wave folding. Now this is the most popular feature on new oscillators at the moment, and it allows us to fold waveforms, which is just a wonderful thing. Let's go back to the scope so we can see that happening. So there's my lovely sine wave, and I can just fold that and bring in those harmonics, and it's a beautiful, beautiful thing in both directions. There it goes. Morph that through to the square. And then there's wave wrapping. Which is like a harsher version. Oh, it just goes bam. Again, in the effects menu, I can use pots. I can use an internal oscillator. Then we have a crusher, a bit crusher, just takes the edge off everything, makes it crunchy. And then finally a drive, which pushes everything square, I guess, is the idea. Now you can't use more than one effect at a time. You choose which effect you want to use and apply it to the wave. It only happens to the main oscillator, not to the sub. So let me load up something a little bit more interesting just to see what kind of stuff I can get out of it. So currently I'm not morphing between waveforms, this is purely the wave folder folding the waves. I can then choose a different waveform with the morph knob. And there's a slight bit of weirdness that goes on when you've selected the pot to be the modulator within an effect when you're running in the matrix. Because when you're in matrix mode, this knob here, the effects knob, actually controls the X axis, the X placement. If I go to the matrix here, you'll see, there you go, it moves it left to right. But in the effects, this is actually controlling the depth of the wave folding. Or is it? Because if I turn it and then go back to the matrix, I can see that the wave has changed. So is it controlling the wave? Is it controlling the wave folding? Or is it doing both? I'm not sure. So there you go, it's a wavetable adventure playground. It's all in there, just sound after waveform after waveform, morphing and moving and adapting and evolving through itself, around itself, kicking out a completely different sub for different stuff and different things, complementing and pulling itself apart, as well as clashing and breaking with the effects that you can warp and wrap and fold and distort and destroy and modulate. Flippin' heck, there's a lot of stuff in here. I mean, that track this was the only sound source. Well, okay, I had some drums and I had a bit of delay going on, but otherwise, crikey, what a thing. And I'd honestly never got anything like that out of this before. It's purely because I've spent some time and I'm focusing on it, that you start to drill down deeper into what it can offer. I mean, I remember when I used the black Wavetable VCO, I tend to sort of turn it on, bang up a couple of waveforms and morph between it and just let it go. I don't really invest a whole lot of time in teasing out any kind of interesting or unique sound. With the Graphic VCO, it pulls you into doing that. I mean, just messing around in this matrix, moving from wave to wave, is extraordinarily good fun. And it's easy. It's just on a couple of knobs and you're moving about and you can see what's happening. The graphic side of it really starts to come in, because that is such a joyful thing on of itself, to be able to see what you're doing, see the waves changing. For me personally, being quite a visually helpful person, I find that to somehow underpin what's going on. It shows me that what I'm doing is making some kind of difference, and that combined with what I'm hearing just gives it a bigger experience. I mean, that was just truly amazing. I've never heard anything quite like it. That was lovely. Wow. I'm really quite stunned at myself. I am, after all, pretty fabulous at this sort of thing, or at least what I find is that I'm quite good at stumbling into things and finding stuff by accident that then ends up sounding all right. Well, I never did. So, moving on then, what else is there to talk about? Well, we have to look at the making of waveforms. For some people, that is the absolute key feature of this. For me, no, not really. I like the waveforms that are in there. I like playing with those. However, when you get to drawing stuff, it does bring out its own kind of beauty. So to get into drawing properly, I think you go back to AB mode. In AB mode, I have an opportunity to edit, which is this second thing here, edit. If I click edit, I'm now able to edit the waveform. I have this range here. Now I can adjust the range with this knob on the right, with the right encoder. And then I can choose the sort of change I want to make, so a sine type change. And then I can apply that by pushing it in or out. Let's choose something a bit spikier. And very quickly I've added a whole load of interest and richness to that wave. I can also got some other tools here, like a pen tool. Now a pen tool is the Graphic VCO equivalent of an Etch-a-Sketch. So if I press this button here, it then becomes a thing, and I can draw whatever sort of wave I want. Another option is a line tool. So I hit a spot and then move, and it will draw a line to the next spot. Oh. Now, it's not the easiest thing in the world. You're faffing around with a pair of encoders, trying to draw in an Etch-a-Sketch style, as I say, and it's cramped and funny and weird, and you've got to go from one to the other and then turn that bit on and then move that and then move that. So, you know, it's not awesome. However, the creation of your own wavetables is awesome. That's completely amazing. It's just, you know, the interface isn't up to all that as yet. However, they are developing a web-based version of this, an editor you can run on your computer, where you can edit waveforms properly in a relaxed manner with a mouse and a keyboard, that kind of thing, and really do it some justice, as opposed to faffing around in this little screen thing here. Now there's more you can do. There's a spectral part, and that is quite interesting. Turn on the spectrum, and you've now got frequency bands down here at the bottom that you can go along to and then just pull one up. That's really, really lovely. Can be lovely. Can also be ouch. So there you go. As I say, the drawing isn't fabulous, but it's there and it's editable, and you can get into creating your own waves if that's your thing. You can then save that as your own wave. You can save it into different wavetables, rearrange the whole thing, stick it wherever you like. Put it wherever you like, we don't care. There's a whole management system within here, and manage, where you can stick everything wherever you want, rearrange the whole thing, redesign the entire wavetable nature within the Graphic VCO. So is that everything? Well, that's pretty much everything, I think. Just a couple of last little things. First of all, under the scope, you can also see what's going on as far as all of the knobs go. So I've got various inputs coming in here. It's showing me the pitch input coming in. Got nothing going into this one at the moment. Showing me what's coming into the effects and into the morph. Look at that. Isn't that rather nice? One last thing to show you, and that's the quantizer, which is in the settings menu, kind of annoyingly, but you'll find it within there under, alongside things like changing the display contrast and bits and pieces. You've got Quantize. Now you've got various scales that you can select. I've got blues, harmonic minor, Arabian, diatonic, diminished, pentatonic, whole tone, chromatic, octaves. That's a good one. Now of course it doesn't need to have a quantizer. In some ways it's a strange thing to have, but it's very useful. And it's in there, so that's a good thing. One thing you can't do, you can't design your own, so you can't just stick in, as far as I can work out, by pressing things. No, I don't think so. You can't seem to change the notes, what notes are selected. I mean, why can't you have this keyboard here and then just poke on a few notes that you'd like to have active and have that as your own quantizer, like you would on a proper quantizer, you'd be selecting notes. But no, there doesn't seem to be a facility for doing that as yet. So it seems to be about enough, I think. I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of sounds within the Graphic VCO, and I've only shown you a few. I've just shown you the movement of waves knocking about and all the various features within the unit itself. But there's tons and tons you could be doing with it that I haven't even got to. So it's just pouring out with sonic possibilities. And please don't take my meager demonstrations as any kind of indication of the scope. I just hope to give you a bit of an idea, because you know what a wavetable is, you know that kind of sound, and hopefully I've been able to demonstrate the power of the Graphic VCO in how it can select and grab and morph and adapt and move between all these things. I'm finding personally that every time I sit down with it, I seem to discover something new. I mean, there's a general wavetable sound of that moving between things. There is that kind of, that sound is quite familiar and can perhaps get a little samey after a while, but then no more samey than a sine wave gets, I guess. What I mean is, I think, is that I find that the more time I invest into it, the better the sound becomes. You can just turn it on and get some wavetable sound out of it. That's fine. But if you focus on it a bit, spend a bit of time with it, you can massage out some extraordinary things. like I did in that bit a minute ago. And I guess what I'm saying is that it responds well to playing and experimentation, because it's not just about generating a waveform, it's all the movement between waveforms. It's the change of harmonics, it's the change of structure, it's the change of richness and complexity as it goes about. And that enables you to craft your own path through it. So you can bring out very unique, very individual sounds and focus down on those. And of course, once you've created something, you can save that as your own wave. Whatever it is, whatever mix, whatever point, take a snapshot, create that into its own wavetable. And suddenly you're coming up with sounds that nobody else has ever done before. Quite possibly. I absolutely love the split between the sub and the main oscillator. It was one of the first things that I discovered about the Graphic VCO, and it just blew my mind that I can do that. I've used it so often now in just creating either intervals or in doing two very different things with some very different sounds. I mean, often when I'm playing with the wavetable side on the main oscillator, I'll just drop the sub in as a sine wave, and that just goes boom, and the whole thing expands and opens up as it underpins the melody that you're playing. It's just a super thing. The effect side of it, I find harder to work with because I'm not always 100% sure what I'm doing. I mean, for a long time to start with, I would sort of turn on the wavefolding or the wrapping and not really know what was happening because I had a whole load of other stuff going on in the wavetable already. If you've already got a very complex waveform, then wavefolding is not going to have a major impact on that. It's just going to sound the same as it's already morphing about through all these waves. It was once I started slowing things down, using more basic wave shapes, that the wavefolding really came into its own, and I finally understood what it was all about. And that's when it becomes interesting. Ring modulation and FM, yeah, that's interesting. It's not really my bag, man. It's not the sort of thing I get particularly excited about. But the wavefolding in here is excellent. The phase distortion, just to give things a little bit of movement, is excellent. Or you can get very, very rhythmic with it. And the internal modulators you have to do that, the internal oscillator with which you can apply to everything, just gives it yet another utility. It has that built in, so I'm not having to use up my Batumi necessary to control it, unless I want to, and I do want to often, but I don't have to because it's there and it's internal, ready to go. So Erica Synths have built in an awful lot of utility functionality to enable it to run very much self-contained, and that adds an awful lot of value to an already awesome oscillator. So there you have it, the Erica Synths Graphic VCO, a wavetable adventure playground with a phenomenal range of sounds. You should get two, and in the meantime, go and make some tunes.